The smell of tobacco smoke and wet asphalt hit me before I even saw them. 7 in the morning, fog rolling in thick. And there's this white pickup parked right at my gate. 2 women standing there like they owned the place. Which, funny thing is, they were about to claim they did. If you're watching Conflict Story, you know it's never just a misunderstanding. I'm coming back from night shift at the plant, dead tired, just wanting to collapse on my porch with a beer. Instead, I see this younger blonde, maybe 25, crisp jeans, oversized flannel, swinging a bolt cutter like she's conducting an orchestra. The older one had to be her mother. Same bleached hair, same hard jawline, holding a stack of papers tight against her chest. My gate lock was already on the ground, busted clean through. "We manage this property now," the younger one says, not even looking at me. Just keeps working that bolt cutter on the chain. "Your lease is up. Time to pack." The sound of metal grinding against metal made my teeth ache. I reached into my jacket pocket, fingers finding my brother's old army dog tag. Been carrying it since Afghanistan took him. Habit when things get weird. "Excuse me?" I stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel. "This is my place. Been paying rent to Thomas Willis for 3 years straight." The mother had to be Karen, that's what folks called her type around here, unfolded those papers with the kind of smile that comes right before bad news. "Property transfer," she said, waving the documents like a flag. "Mr. Willis signed everything over to us last week. You've got 48 hours to clear out, or we call the sheriff." The fog was lifting, but everything felt cloudier. I looked at those papers. Official letterhead, signatures that looked right, even had the county seal. But something felt wrong. Thomas Willis was a straight shooter. Old school handshake deals, never missed our monthly coffee. Why wouldn't he tell me? "Where's Thomas?" I asked. "Hospital," the daughter said, snapping photos of my cabin with her phone. "Stroke, real bad one." She didn't sound sorry about it. Have you ever had that moment where your legs just go weak, when the ground under you starts feeling like quicksand? That's what hit me watching this kid photograph my life like she was cataloging evidence. "We're documenting damages," Karen said. "Previous tenant clearly didn't maintain the property. That'll come out of your deposit. $1,200, money I needed for next month's bills." The younger one, Megan, I heard Karen call her, kept snapping pictures. Click, click, click. My porch swing that creaked in the right spots. The vegetable garden I'd been nursing for 2 seasons. The firewood I'd split and stacked for winter. "You can't just show up and..." "Actually, we can." Karen's voice had this practiced authority, like she'd done this before. "Property law is property law. You want to dispute it, hire a lawyer. Otherwise, 48 hours. The dog tag felt warm in my palm. My brother always said the worst fights start when you're not ready for them. Megan finished her photo session and walked right up to me, close enough I could smell her perfume mixed with cigarette smoke. "Nothing personal, Dave, just business." How did she know my name? I hadn't told them. The lease was in my name, sure, but that was filed at the county office. You'd have to know exactly what to look for. "You've done your homework," I said. "We do our research." Karen folded the papers back up, crisp and neat. 48 hours. After that, it gets uncomfortable. They climbed into that white pickup, engine rumbling like distant thunder. Megan rolled down her window as they backed out. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," she called out. "We've got friends at the sheriff's office." I watched their taillights disappear into the fog, standing there in my broken gateway with a worthless lease in my back pocket and questions piling up like storm clouds. 48 hours to lose everything I'd built. The cabin wasn't much. 2 rooms, a wood stove, running water when the pipes didn't freeze. But it was mine. First place that felt like home since coming back from overseas. I picked up the pieces of my lock, metal still warm from where the bolt cutter had bitten through. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. Something about this whole setup stunk worse than the plant's sulfur pit. Thomas Willis in the hospital, convenient timing, these women knowing my name, having legal papers ready to go, like they'd been planning this. But planning what, and why my place? The sun was trying to burn through the fog, casting everything in this sick yellow light. I stood there holding broken metal, watching shadows move wrong in the morning mist. That's when I knew this was just the beginning. The broken lock pieces were still warm in my hands when I heard the rumble of another engine. This time, it wasn't the pickup. It was a county sedan, white and official, kicking up dust as it rolled toward my cabin. I figured Karen hadn't wasted any time making good on her threat. Deputy Martinez stepped out, hat pulled low, clipboard in hand. Known him for years. Good man, fair, but he followed rules like scripture. "Morning, Dave." His voice carried that careful neutral tone cops use when they don't want to be there. "Got a call about a property dispute." "Let me guess. 2 blonde women, claims about ownership?" He nodded, checking his notes. "They filed a formal complaint. Says you're trespassing on private property, refusing to vacate after legal notice." The morning air felt thicker suddenly, like breathing through wet cotton. "Martinez, you know me. Been living here 3 years. Never caused trouble." "I know." He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "But they've got documentation. Property transfer forms, signed and notarized. Far as the law's concerned, they're the rightful owners." I pulled out my lease agreement, creased from being carried in my wallet. "What about this?" He examined it, taking his time. "This shows you had permission from the previous owner, but if ownership changed hands..." He handed it back with a shrug. "Lease might not transfer automatically. Have you ever felt like you're drowning in paperwork? Like the system's designed to grind you down until you just give up?" "Where's Thomas Willis in all this?" I asked. "Hospital. Stroke hit him hard 2 weeks ago. Been in a coma since." Martinez lowered his voice. "Between you and me, those women showed up at his bedside the day after it happened. Real concerned about his affairs, they said." The pieces started clicking together, ugly and sharp. 2 weeks ago, but they said the transfer happened last week. Martinez frowned, flipping through his clipboard. "Transfer document is dated." He paused, counting. 9 days ago. That'd be Thursday. "Thomas has been unconscious for 2 weeks, but he signed papers 9 days ago." That's... Martinez stopped talking, his expression changing. "That's a good question." The sound of gravel under his boots seemed louder as he paced, thinking. A crow cawed from somewhere in the pine trees, harsh and mocking. "Dave, I can't advise you legally, you understand? But if there's irregularities in the documentation..." "You'd investigate?" "I'd have to, but you'd need proof. Real proof, not just suspicion." That's when I heard vehicles approaching, multiple engines growing louder. Martinez heard it too, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. 3 trucks rolled up my driveway. Karen and Megan in the white pickup, followed by 2 others, a moving truck and a flatbed with Burke Notary Services painted on the side. "See, 48 hours isn't up yet," I called out as they parked. Karen climbed down from her truck, wearing different clothes now. Business suit instead of jeans, like she was dressed for something official. "We're here to document the property condition, part of the legal process." The notary, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, approached with his briefcase. "Mr. Collins, I'm Burke. I'll be witnessing the formal eviction notice." "Eviction notice?" Martinez stepped forward. "Ma'am, I wasn't informed of any eviction proceedings." Karen's smile never wavered. "Just served the papers this morning, deputy. Everything's legal and proper." She handed Martinez a fresh set of documents. While he read, I watched the moving truck crew start unloading equipment, not moving boxes, surveying gear, stakes, measuring chains, a transit level. "What's with the surveyor equipment?" I asked. Megan answered without looking up from her phone. "Property boundaries need to be reestablished. Previous tenant may have encroached on neighboring lots." The dog tag was getting slick with sweat in my palm. My brother's voice echoed in my head. "When they come at you sideways, Dave, that's when you know they're scared of a straight fight." "Deputy," Burke the notary called out, "could you witness these signatures? Just standard procedure." Martinez walked over, still studying those papers. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but his posture changed. Shoulders went rigid. The surveyor crew started driving stakes around my property line. Each hammer blow echoed off the hills like gunshots. Thunk, thunk, thunk. "You know what's funny?" I said to Megan, who was still photographing everything. "Your mother knew my name this morning, before I introduced myself." She stopped taking pictures. "So?" "That lease agreement's filed at the county office, but you'd have to know exactly which property to look for. Lot number, legal description. Pretty specific research for people who just inherited this place." Her jaw tightened. "We're thorough." Thorough people usually know when someone's been in a coma for 2 weeks. Martinez was walking back toward us, his face grim. Burke the notary packed up his briefcase quickly, like he suddenly had somewhere else to be. "Dave," Martinez said quietly, "we need to talk, privately." Karen called out as we walked toward the porch. "Deputy, I hope you explained the legal consequences of interfering with lawful property seizure. Property seizure, not eviction, not transfer, seizure." That's when I knew this wasn't just about my cabin. This was about something bigger, something that required taking my home away completely. Martinez stopped at the bottom of my porch steps, close enough that his voice wouldn't carry. "Those documents, the signatures don't match." "What do you mean?" "I've seen Thomas Willis sign papers before. Traffic citations, property disputes. His handwriting's distinctive, left-handed, slants backward. These signatures are right-handed, fresh ink too." The surveyor crew had moved closer to the cabin now. One of them was measuring the distance from my foundation to the property line, calling out numbers to his partner. 18 feet, 4 inches from the north corner, he shouted. Megan suddenly looked up from her phone. "That's not right." "What's not right?" Karen snapped. "The setback requirement. County code says 15 feet minimum from the property line." Megan's voice carried a note of excitement. "If the cabin's only 18 feet from the boundary, that's a violation." I felt my stomach drop. A violation of what? Burke the notary, who'd been heading for his truck, stopped and turned around. Like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Zoning violation," Karen said, that predatory smile returning. "Structures built too close to property lines can be condemned." The hammer blows stopped. Everything went quiet except for the wind in the pines and the sound of my world falling apart. Martinez looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Dave, if there's a zoning violation, county has to act on it, even if the ownership dispute gets resolved. So either way, I lose the cabin." "Either way, you lose the cabin." That's when I understood. This wasn't about ownership at all. It was about getting me gone, no matter what. And they'd planned for every angle. But they'd made one mistake. They'd given me too much information. The surveyor's measuring tape snapped tight in the morning air, that metallic zing cutting through the silence like a blade. Megan was already on her phone, probably calling whoever handles zoning violations. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, watching me like a cat watches a wounded bird. But here's what they didn't know. I'd built that cabin myself. Every board, every nail, every measurement. And I'd been obsessive about setbacks because I'd seen too many neighbors get burned by code violations. "Hold up there, Chief," I called to the surveyor. "You sure about that measurement?" He looked up from his equipment, wiping sweat from his forehead. 18 feet, 4 inches, measured it twice. "From which corner of the foundation?" "North corner, like the lady requested." I walked over to where he'd driven his stake. The ground was soft there, recently disturbed. Pine needles scattered in a way that didn't look natural. "That's interesting," I said, loud enough for Martinez to hear, "because the property markers were set by the county 3 years ago. Concrete posts sunk 2 feet deep." The surveyor frowned. "Ma'am, you said the original markers were missing." Karen's smile flickered for just a second. "They are missing. We had to reestablish the boundaries based on the legal description." I knelt down next to the stake, brushing away loose dirt and pine needles. About 6 inches down, my fingers hit something hard. Concrete. "Martinez," I called. "You might want to see this." The real property marker was still there, exactly where it should be. But this new stake was planted 18 inches inside my property line. Someone had tried to bury the original marker under a pile of forest debris. "Well, I'll be damned," Martinez muttered, kneeling beside me. "That's the original county marker, all right. See the survey number stamped in the concrete?" The surveyor looked confused. "But the coordinates I was given..." "Were wrong," I finished, "by about 18 inches, just enough to make my cabin look like a violation." Have you ever watched someone's perfect plan start unraveling in real time? Karen's face went through about 5 different expressions before settling on controlled anger. "There must be some mistake," she said. "Yeah," I said, standing up and dusting off my hands. "But who made it?" The smell of fresh coffee drifted from my cabin. I'd left the pot on this morning, and it was still brewing. One of those small comforts that suddenly felt precious. Megan was talking fast into her phone, turned away from us. I caught fragments. Need to verify legal description, county records. Burke the notary had been quiet through all this, but now he cleared his throat. Perhaps we should postpone the documentation until the boundary dispute is resolved. No postponement, Karen snapped. The eviction stands regardless of where the property line falls. Actually, Martinez said, if there's evidence of surveying fraud, that calls the whole ownership claim into question. That word, fraud, hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. The surveyor was packing up his equipment, shaking his head. Look, folks, I just go where the client tells me. If the coordinates were wrong, that's not on me. Who gave you the coordinates? Martinez asked. The lady there. He pointed at Karen. Said she had them from the original deed. Karen pulled out her papers again, but this time her hands weren't as steady. Everything's properly documented. The deed clearly states... Hold on, I interrupted. You said Thomas signed the transfer papers last week, Thursday specifically. That's correct. But you also said you needed to reestablish property boundaries because the markers were missing. How would you know the markers were missing if you just inherited the property Thursday? The silence stretched like a guitar string about to snap. Martinez was taking notes now, his cop instincts fully engaged. Ma'am, that's a fair question. When did you first visit this property? We inspected it after the transfer was finalized. But the surveyor says you provided coordinates from the original deed. If you just got the deed Thursday, when did you have time to research county records, hire a surveyor, and get coordinates? Megan had finished her phone call and was walking back toward us, but her expression had changed. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked like panic. Mom, she said quietly, we need to go, now. We're not finished here, Karen replied through gritted teeth. Yes, we are. Megan grabbed her mother's arm. Trust me? That's when I noticed the moving truck crew had been listening to every word. One of them, a younger guy with a beard, was looking at Karen like he'd just figured something out. Lady, he called out, you said this was a legal eviction, but if the property boundaries are fake and the ownership papers are questionable, we're not moving anything, his partner added. This smells like insurance fraud or something worse. The crew started loading their equipment back onto the truck. Burke the notary was already in his vehicle, engine running. Martinez stepped closer to Karen. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station. We need to discuss these documents in detail. Are you arresting us? Not yet, but I have questions and you have answers. One way or another, we're going to sort this out. Karen looked around at her collapsing operation. The surveyor packing up, the moving crew leaving, Burke driving away. The only sound was gravel crunching under departing wheels and the distant hum of my coffee maker. This isn't over, she said to me. Actually, I replied, fingering that dog tag in my pocket. I think it's just getting started. As Martinez led them toward his patrol car, Megan turned back to look at me. For a moment, the mask slipped completely. What I saw wasn't anger or frustration. It was fear. Real deep down, we're in serious trouble fear. That's when I knew this whole thing was bigger than a simple property grab. These women weren't just opportunists trying to steal my cabin. They were running some kind of con, and I'd just become the loose thread that could unravel everything. The question was, what exactly had they been planning to do with my place once they got rid of me? And more importantly, was I ready for the answer? The patrol car's taillights disappeared around the bend, leaving me standing in a cloud of dust and unanswered questions. My coffee was still brewing inside, but suddenly I didn't feel much like drinking it. I walked the perimeter of my property, following the real boundary markers. Every concrete post was exactly where it should be, undisturbed except for that one spot where Karen's people had tried to bury it. 3 years of calling this place home, and someone had spent weeks planning how to steal it from me. But why? My cabin wasn't worth much. Maybe $40,000 if you were generous. The land was decent, but nothing special. No lake access, no mineral rights, just 20 acres of pine trees and rocky soil. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Drop this now. You don't know what you're getting into. I stared at that message, feeling my brother's dog tag grow warm in my pocket. Someone was scared enough to make threats. That meant I was on to something. The smell of burning leaves drifted from somewhere deeper in the woods. Odd for this time of year. Fire restrictions were still in effect. I followed the smoke trail through the trees, boots crunching on fallen pine needles. About half a mile from my cabin, I found the source. A small clearing I'd never noticed before, freshly cut. Someone had been burning documents, lots of them. The fire was still smoldering, papers reduced to ash and scattered fragments. I kicked through the remains with a stick. Most of it was too far gone to read, but one piece caught my eye. A letterhead, partially burned, Land Development, with what looked like architectural drawings underneath. Development. That was the missing piece. My phone rang. Martinez. Dave, you need to get down to the hospital, now. Thomas? He's awake, and he's asking for you. Valley General Hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I found Thomas in room 314, propped up in bed, looking about 20 years older than the last time I'd seen him. His left hand was curled and useless, but his eyes were sharp. Dave. His voice was slurred but determined. They said Karen was here, yesterday, with papers. I know, she claimed you signed over the property to her. Thomas tried to shake his head, wincing at the effort. Never signed, nothing. Haven't seen Karen in 15 years, not since the divorce. The pieces clicked together like rounds sliding into a chamber. Karen's your ex-wife. Bitter divorce. She tried to get half the land then. Judge said no. He fumbled for a water cup with his good hand. Why would she come back now? I helped him with the water, thinking about those burned papers in the woods. Thomas, has anyone approached you about developing your land in the past year or so? His eyes widened. County Planning Office, 6 months ago, said they were updating zoning maps, asked about access roads, utilities. He paused, struggling with the words. I told them, not interested in selling. What did they say? That things change. People get old, have medical bills. Property becomes burden instead of blessing. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. Thomas, I think your stroke wasn't just bad luck. I think someone's been planning this for months. He gripped my arm with surprising strength. Check the safe deposit box, Bank of Mountain View, keys in my kitchen drawer, coffee can. What's in the box? Everything. Original deeds, development offers, insurance policies. His voice was getting weaker. Karen knows about insurance money. $75,000 if structures burn down. Insurance fraud. That's what this was about. Get me evicted, torch my cabin, collect the insurance money, then sell the land to developers. Clean and simple, except they'd underestimated how hard I'd fight for my home. Thomas, rest now. I'll handle this. Be careful, Dave. Karen's not working alone. She's got connections. The nurse came in to check his vitals, so I headed for the parking garage. My truck was on the 3rd level, tucked between 2 SUVs. As I approached, I noticed something wrong. All 4 tires had been slashed. Deep cuts, professional work. Someone wanted me stranded. But they'd made a mistake. I always carried a spare tire and a plug kit. Old habit from my Army days. 20 minutes later, I was mobile again, driving carefully on 1 temporary fix and 3 damaged tires. The Bank of Mountain View was downtown, a brick building that hadn't changed since the 1960s. I explained the situation to the manager, showed her my ID and the power of attorney Thomas had scrawled on a hospital napkin. The safe deposit box was packed with documents, property deeds going back 50 years, insurance policies, correspondence with county officials. But the most interesting item was a manila envelope marked Confidential Development Proposal. Inside were architectural plans for a shopping complex called Mountain View Plaza. 30 stores, a supermarket, 2 restaurants. The proposed location was marked on a survey map. 50 acres including my cabin, Thomas's house, and 3 neighboring properties. At the bottom of the proposal was a signature I recognized, Burke, the notary who'd shown up at my place this morning. He wasn't just witnessing documents, he was one of the developers. My phone buzzed again, another text. Saw your truck at the bank. You're making this personal now. I looked around the bank parking lot. No white pickup, no obvious surveillance. But someone was watching. The smart move would have been to drive straight to the sheriff's office, turn over everything to Martinez, let the law handle it, but these people had threatened my home, tried to frame me, slashed my tires. They'd made it personal the moment they drove stakes into my property. Besides, I had a better idea. If Karen and her crew wanted to play games with property lines and fake documents, I could play games too. But my games were going to have consequences they weren't expecting. Time to show them what happens when you pick a fight with someone who's got nothing left to lose and a brother's memory to honor. The dog tag felt solid and reassuring in my pocket as I drove back toward the mountains. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the pine trees. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this little conspiracy was going to know exactly who they had tried to mess with. The parking lot of Riley's Tavern was busier than usual for a Tuesday night. Local watering hole where folks came to complain about property taxes and gossip about their neighbors. Perfect place to plant a few seeds. I walked in carrying that manila envelope from Thomas's safe deposit box, made sure a few people saw it. Rita, the bartender, knew everyone's business in 3 counties. If I wanted word to spread, she was the place to start. Evening, Dave. Heard you had some excitement at your place today. News traveled fast in small towns. You could say that. Rita, can I ask you something? What do you know about Burke's notary business? She polished a glass, considering. Burke? Been around forever. Handles a lot of real estate deals, wills, that sort of thing. She lowered her voice. Though lately, he's been throwing money around. New truck, expensive clothes. Makes you wonder. Wonder what? Where a notary gets that kind of cash. I opened the envelope just enough for her to see the architectural drawings. Maybe from development deals? Her eyes widened. That's your property, isn't it? Along with 4 others. Looks like someone's been planning a shopping center without mentioning it to the current owners. Rita set down her glass. You know what? About 3 months ago, Burke was in here with some city folks. Suits, expensive watches. They were talking about clearing titles and expediting transfers. I thought they meant normal real estate stuff, but one of them said something about how sometimes property owners needed motivation to sell. At the time, I figured he meant money. Now I'm wondering if they meant something else. The smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke couldn't mask the scent of corruption floating around this whole deal. Rita, do me a favor. If anyone asks what we talked about, tell them I seemed real upset about losing my cabin. Like I might do something desperate. She nodded slowly. Dave, be careful. These development people, they've got deep pockets and shallow morals. I finished my beer and drove home, taking the long way to see if anyone was following. No white pickup, but a dark sedan stayed about a quarter mile behind me for several miles before turning off. Back at the cabin, I set up my laptop and did some research. Burke Notary Services had handled an unusual number of property transfers in the past year. All rural properties, all involving elderly or distressed owners. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. My phone rang around 10 p.m., unknown number. Dave Collins? Speaking. This is Attorney Reynolds from Mountain View Development. I understand you're having some difficulties with your property situation. Difficulties? The ownership dispute with Mrs. Karen Willis. We represent several interested parties in the area. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting, discuss a mutually beneficial solution. So, Karen had kept her ex-husband's name for the scam. Professional touch. What kind of solution? We're prepared to offer $50,000 for your property. Cash, immediate closing. You could relocate anywhere you want. Start fresh. $50,000 for land they plan to turn into millions in retail development. Generous. That's interesting, but I'm not the owner. According to Karen Willis, she owns my property now. A pause. There seems to be some confusion about the ownership documentation. We're confident that can be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Whose satisfaction exactly? Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Collins, I think you're a reasonable man. Sometimes it's better to take a good deal than fight a battle you can't win. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. These property disputes can get complicated, expensive, dangerous even. The line went dead. I sat on my porch in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. My brother used to say you could tell a lot about a man by how he handled being cornered. Most people panic, make bad decisions. Smart people find a way to turn the corner into a weapon. Time to get smart. I spent the next 2 hours making copies of everything from Thomas's safe deposit box. Then I drove to 3 different locations and hid copies in places only I knew about. Insurance in case someone decided to pay me another visit. On the way back, I stopped at a 24-hour copy shop and made one more set. This one went into a manila envelope addressed to Martinez at the sheriff's office, along with a note, "If something happens to me, this is why." But I wasn't planning to let it come to that. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. The cabin was dark, but something felt wrong. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching, listening. The normal forest sounds were missing. No insects, no small animals moving in the underbrush. Like everything was holding its breath. I approached the cabin from the back, moving quietly through the trees. The front door was standing open about 6 inches. I never left doors open. Ever. The smell hit me before I saw the damage. Gasoline. Someone had doused the inside of my cabin with accelerant. But they'd made a mistake. The smell was too fresh, too strong. They were probably still nearby, waiting to light the match once I went inside. Have you ever had that moment when you realize you're being hunted? When the tables flip and you're not the aggressor anymore, you're the prey? I backed away from the cabin, moving deeper into the woods. My phone had no signal this far out, which meant I was on my own. Just me, whatever was in my truck, and whoever was planning to burn down my home. The dog tag felt cold against my palm as I worked my way around to where I'd parked. My truck was still there, but now it had company. That dark sedan from earlier was tucked behind some trees about 50 yards away. Engine off, but I could see the faint glow of cigarettes inside. 2 people, maybe 3, waiting for the show to start. That's when I understood the plan. They'd torch my cabin with me inside, make it look like an accident. Distraught property owner, facing eviction, tragic end to a sad story. The insurance would pay out, the development could proceed, and I'd be just another casualty of progress. But they'd forgotten one thing about cornered animals. Sometimes they bite back. The cigarette glow moved inside the sedan. Someone was getting impatient. I had maybe 5 minutes before they decided to start the fire, whether I was inside or not. But here's what they didn't know about me. 3 tours in Afghanistan teaches you a few things about improvised tactics, and I still had tools in my truck they hadn't counted on. I belly crawled through the underbrush until I reached my pickup. In the toolbox behind the cab, wrapped in an old tarp, was something I'd hoped never to need again. My brother's night vision scope, the one they'd sent home with his personal effects. Military grade, battery still good. Through the scope, I could see 3 figures in the sedan. Karen in the passenger seat, Megan driving, and a third person I didn't recognize. Big guy, probably hired muscle. The muscle was holding what looked like a road flare. Perfect. Let them make the first move. I circled wide through the forest, staying low, using trees for cover. The gasoline smell was stronger now, drifting on the night breeze. They'd really soaked the place. What they hadn't noticed was my cabin's location, uphill from their position, with a dry creek bed running between us. Creek beds make excellent fire breaks, but they also channel wind and sound. I positioned myself about 30 yards from their car downwind, close enough to hear everything. "How long are we going to wait?" Megan's voice, tense and impatient. "Until he goes inside," Karen replied. "Has to look natural." "What if he doesn't come back tonight?" "Then we wait until tomorrow. This has to be clean." The big guy spoke for the first time, voice like gravel in a cement mixer. Clean went out the window when the cops started asking questions. Should have handled this different from the start. "It would have been clean if you'd done your job right," Karen snapped. "The property boundaries were supposed to be definitive." "Lady, I buried the markers like you said. Not my fault the old man marked his territory like a paranoid survivalist." Interesting. So they'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, waiting for Thomas to get sick, or maybe helping it along. "The development company's getting nervous," Megan said. "Reynolds called twice today. They want this wrapped up by Friday, or they're pulling out." "They're not pulling out. Too much money at stake. $50 million in retail development doesn't just disappear because one tenant won't cooperate. $50 million. No wonder they were willing to commit arson and murder." The muscle shifted in his seat. "There's his truck. He's back." Through the scope, I watched them tense up, ready to move. Karen had a cell phone in her hand, probably speed dial to 911. for when they needed to report the tragic accident. Time to change the script. I had one advantage they didn't know about: the old hunting cabin where I kept emergency supplies, Coleman lanterns, camping gear, and most importantly, a CB radio with enough power to reach the sheriff's office. But first, I needed evidence of what they were planning. My brother's scope had a recording function, military surplus tech that could capture audio and video in low-light conditions. I activated it and settled in to document their conversation. "Give him 5 more minutes," Karen said. "If he doesn't go inside, we torch it anyway. Make it look like electrical problems." What about the gasoline smell? Old cabin, kerosene lamps, wood stove. Accelerant could be anything. Besides, rural fire departments aren't exactly CSI. The big guy lit another cigarette. In the scope's amplified vision, his face looked like something carved from granite. Professional arsonist. Probably not his first job. "You sure the insurance will pay out?" he asked. "Already confirmed. $75,000, and Thomas Willis is listed as the beneficiary. With his condition, Karen has power of attorney." Convenient. Convenient is having an ex-husband too brain damaged to remember signing papers. That was enough. I had them admitting to insurance fraud, arson conspiracy, and taking advantage of Thomas's medical condition. But I needed more. I keyed the CB radio, broadcasting on the emergency frequency. "Sheriff's office, this is Dave Collins. I have an emergency situation at my property on Mountain View Road. 3 suspects planning arson, possibly murder. Need immediate assistance." Static, then Martinez's voice. "Dave, what's your location?" "About 2 miles up Mountain View Road. Suspects are in a dark sedan, Virginia plates." I read off the license number through the scope. "Armed and dangerous. Approach with caution." ETA 12 minutes. Stay hidden. Do not engage. 12 minutes was a long time when people were planning to burn down your home with you in it. The muscle threw his cigarette out the window. "Time's up. I'm lighting it." "Wait," Karen said. "I hear something." They'd heard the CB transmission. All 3 were looking around nervously. "Could be nothing," Megan said, but she'd already started the engine. "No, something's wrong. We need to go." The big guy was already out of the car, moving toward my cabin with the road flare. Even if they ran now, he could still torch the place. That's when I made a decision that would have made my brother proud. I stepped out of the woods, hands visible, walking slowly toward the cabin like I didn't know they were there, acting like the oblivious victim they expected me to be. "Hey!" the muscle called out. "Stop right there!" I kept walking, pretending I couldn't hear him over the wind. He lit the flare, that angry red glow cutting through the darkness. "I said stop!" I turned around, acting surprised. "Who's there?" That's when Karen made her fatal mistake. She got out of the car and walked into the light, where my brother's scope could capture her face clearly. "Dave Collins," she called out. "You should have taken our offer." "What offer?" $50,000, more than this place is worth. The muscle was moving closer to my cabin, flare held high. "Lady, we need to do this now." "Do what?" I asked, still playing dumb. Karen smiled, cold and predatory. "Clean up a problem." That's when she gave the signal, and the big guy threw the flare through my open door. But I was already moving, diving behind my truck as the cabin exploded into flame. The gasoline vapors caught instantly, turning my home into a bonfire that lit up the entire forest. Through it all, my brother's scope kept recording. Every word, every face, every criminal act. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Karen and her crew heard them too. They were scrambling for their car, but it was too late. The light from the burning cabin made them visible for miles. As the flames consumed everything I'd built, I held that dog tag tight and whispered, "This one's for you, Tommy." Justice was coming, and it was going to burn as bright as my cabin. The flames reached 20 feet into the night sky, turning my cabin into a beacon that could be seen from the next county. But instead of despair, I felt something unexpected. Satisfaction. They'd played right into my hands. Martinez arrived first, patrol car sliding to a stop in the gravel. Behind him came 2 fire trucks and another deputy. The whole forest was lit up like a war zone. "Dave, you okay?" Martinez shouted over the roar of flames. "Better than okay," I called back, holding up the scope. "I got everything." Karen's sedan was trapped now, blocked by emergency vehicles on the narrow mountain road. They sat there like deer in headlights, probably trying to figure out how this had all gone wrong. What they didn't know was that I'd planned for this moment. See, when I found those burned papers in the woods earlier, I'd recognized something. The architectural drawings weren't just plans. They were permits, already approved by the county, contingent on property acquisition. That meant this whole development deal was further along than anyone knew. And that gave me leverage. "Martinez," I said, handing him the scope. "Audio and video recording of conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. Everything you need." He took the device, his expression grim. "Dave, your cabin was insured for $75,000, just like Karen said. But here's what she didn't know. I transferred the title to myself yesterday when I found out Thomas was in the hospital. Legal and proper, witnessed by the bank manager." The fire chief approached, shaking his head. "Nothing we can save here, but we can keep it from spreading to the forest." "Perfect. Let it burn completely. Better for my case." Karen finally got out of her car, trying to look innocent. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. We saw the fire and came to help." "Is that right?" Martinez replied, studying the scope's display. "Because according to this recording, you just confessed to multiple felonies. I don't know what you're talking about." But her voice had lost that confident edge. She was starting to understand that the game was over. Megan tried to run, made it about 50 yards before the deputy tackled her in a patch of muddy ground near the creek. The big guy just sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, smart enough to know when he was beaten. "Dave," Martinez said quietly, "how long have you been planning this?" "Since this morning, when I realized they knew too much about my property. Military training. When someone's setting an ambush, sometimes the best defense is to let them spring it, then turn their trap against them." The flames were starting to die down, leaving behind the skeleton of my home. 3 years of memories reduced to ash and twisted metal, but I wasn't mourning. I was calculating. Martinez read Karen her rights while the deputy cuffed Megan. The big guy turned out to be a professional torch named Eddie Kowalski, wanted in 3 states for arson for hire. Lucky break for everyone he decided to cooperate. "There's more," I told Martinez. "Development conspiracy involving county officials. Burke the notary is in it up to his eyeballs. I've got documentation hidden in 3 locations." "Jesus, Dave, how deep does this go?" "Deep enough that $50 million in retail development was riding on getting me out of the way." That's when Karen made her last desperate play. "You can't prove anything," she screamed as they loaded her into the patrol car. "The cabin's gone. The evidence is destroyed." I walked over to the car window, close enough that she could see my face clearly. "Karen, remember when you said you'd done your research on me? Well, I did some research too. Did you know that insurance fraud becomes a federal crime when it crosses state lines? Or that your development partners have investors in Delaware?" Her face went white. "FBI's already got copies of everything. Your phone records, bank transfers, emails with the development company. This stopped being a local matter about 6 hours ago. Have you ever seen someone realize they've destroyed their entire life in pursuit of money? It's not pretty." The fire trucks were rolling up their hoses, emergency over. What was left of my cabin looked like a bomb crater, but the concrete foundation was intact, solid base to build on. Martinez finished his paperwork and walked over. "Dave, you're going to have to come in tomorrow, give a formal statement. This is going to be a big case." "What about Thomas?" "Hospital says he's improving. Turns out the stress of thinking he'd lost his property was making his recovery harder. Once he found out you'd exposed the scam, his condition started stabilizing. Small victories." "One more thing," I said. "The development deal Karen mentioned, it might not be completely illegal, but if the county was planning to use eminent domain to force out property owners, people have a right to know." Martinez nodded. "I'll make sure the right people hear about it." As the last emergency vehicle pulled away, I stood alone in the ruins of my home. The smell of smoke and ash filled the air, mixed with the clean scent of pine trees that had survived the fire. I pulled out my brother's dog tag, now warm from the heat that had consumed my cabin. He'd always said that sometimes you have to lose something to find out what it's really worth. My cabin was gone, but the land was still mine. The insurance money would rebuild it, bigger and better. Karen and her crew were going to prison. The development conspiracy was exposed. Thomas was recovering. And I'd learned something important about myself. When they tried to take everything I had, I didn't break. I fought back. I won. 3 weeks later, I was living in a travel trailer while construction crews rebuilt my cabin. Better foundation, improved design, solar panels for energy independence. Insurance money, plus the settlement from the development company, meant I could afford upgrades I'd only dreamed of. Karen got 15 years for conspiracy and arson. Megan got 7 for being a willing participant. Eddie Kowalski turned state's evidence and got 5 in minimum security. Burke lost his notary license and faced civil suits from a dozen property owners he'd helped defraud. The development company folded when their investors found out about the criminal conspiracy. But the best part came last month when Thomas Willis got out of the hospital, fully recovered, sharp as ever, grateful to have his land back under his control. "Does Dave," he said, sitting on my new porch, "I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything, Thomas. We look out for each other around here." He smiled, looking out at the mountains. "That's what makes this place worth fighting for." That night, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky red and gold. My brother's dog tag caught the light, a reminder that some fights are worth everything you have to give. They'd tried to take my home, but they'd given me something more valuable, the knowledge that I could survive anything they threw at me. And if anyone else wanted to test that theory, well, I'd be ready for them too. Some things don't burn, they just get stronger.